"Mum, can you please show up now? I'm bored and lonely," Damien said. Before Abednego knew what was happening, Damien's mum appeared, standing behind him. Abednego began to shiver. Donatus, Abednego's roommate, and he once had interviews one morning in separate organizations, on the same date and time. After Abednego bathed and dressed up, he had to wait for Donatus to dress up too, so they could leave together, trek to the junction together before taking separate vehicles to their destinations. They were having their normal banter and making fun of each other on their way, and Donatus was busy mocking Abednego for always admiring their landlord's daughter because of her big buttocks. To say the truth, the girl wasn't that beautiful, but one could easily mistake her buttocks for a pillow if she were on a bed. "Abednego, if care is not taken, you will soon be issued a quit notice. Better be careful and always make use of your senses. That girl is just a small girl. I'm warning you now. Let it not be as if I did not warn you," Donatus said as they walked down the lonely street. "Please keep quiet. Which small girl? Can't you see the bright future behind her? For her to be able to gather such soft spots behind her clearly shows she's no longer a child." "That girl is 18 anyway," Abednego replied. "Just be careful. You know how very harsh her mum can be. You know you moved into the compound first before coming to join you. If you end up being ejected from that house now, I do not have a dime on me to contribute to go look for another apartment," Donatus said. "Calm down. Nothing of such will happen. The fact that I always admire her does not mean I'm lusting after her. Just calm down, don't be afraid," Abednego assured. A few more minutes while still walking down the road, they saw a little boy of about 7 years old standing in the middle of the road with a toy car in his hands, holding it firmly with 2 hands. They both walked past him, but Abednego paused to take a proper look at him. He knew that something wasn't just right about him. "Abednego, we are running late now. Come, let's go," Donatus fumed. "Hey, why are you standing in the middle of the road like that? Leave there," Abednego yelled. The little boy turned and looked at him, shook his head, and then turned back, maintaining his former position. "Are you deaf? Come on, leave that place and go home," Abednego fumed. "Guy, I'm leaving you here. It's almost 8, and you're here doing nonsense." "Is he standing there with your 2 legs?" Donatus queried. Haba, what if it were to be your son or younger brother? Would you have left him to continue standing there all alone?" Abednego questioned. "We'll meet later then. I'm out of here," Donatus said, walking out. "Guy, wait. Are you leaving?" Abednego queried. He was already on his way. Then he looked back. "Your father there," he said, and proceeded. Well, there was something about this little boy that Abednego couldn't just ignore. He walked up to him and squatted before him. He was such a very cute little boy, with such a nice haircut fit for his face. Abednego smiled. "Why are you standing here all alone? Where's your mum?" he queried. "She's at home," the boy said, pointing towards an apartment. "Then why are you standing here all alone this early?" "I'm hungry," he said. "Don't you think it's too early? Your mother might be looking for you, you know." "So, it's time to go home," Abednego said, dipping his hand inside his pocket and bringing out the old 500 naira note he had on him. It was his last cash. It was 200 naira for transport fare to the interview, so he would be left with 300 naira after doing his calculations. Well, Abednego took the little boy by the hand, and they walked into a shop. He asked the lady to please help change the 500 naira note. Then he gave the little boy 200 naira and said to him, "I'm sorry, I have just 500 on me, and I have an interview. Just manage 200. Let me keep the change for my transport fare down to where I'm going." Not like I have the transport fare to return home yet, but let's see what God can do." The boy nodded. "Thank you," he said, smiling so innocently. "Be a good boy and make sure you go back home," Abednego said, rubbing his hair, and he left. Abednego saw a free lift that took him down to the venue of the interview. Even though he was 5 minutes late, it was still granted. After the interview, he stood outside the building waiting for a bike to take him home when a car parked before him. "Miko," the person in the car hailed. Abednego looked closely. The face looked familiar. "Agada," he called, not sure if it was him though. "Yes, it's me," he said, beaming with smiles. "See this one that once looked like a baby lizard? See how chubby and cute you're looking?" Abednego teased. "Stupid boy," Agada said, laughing so hard, then alighted. Agada was Abednego's coursemate in the university. If Abednego was told that he would be this successful in life, he would have doubted it, because Agada was so unserious. All he knew how to do was disturb everyone in the hostel with dry jokes and off-key songs. They shook hands and gave each other a hug. "Where are you headed?" Agada queried. "Home, man. I just finished an interview. Let me go home and relax my head." "Oh, you're still jobless?" he queried, giggling. "You're a fool," Abednego said as he opened Agada's car door and sat in the car. He then sat too and drove. They talked about so many things, and Abednego alighted when they reached his junction. Agada even gave him some money, and they bade each other farewell. Abednego decided to just take a stroll to see his regular roadside food vendor who sells tea and makes noodles down the road. But he saw the little boy he had seen earlier in front of his shop with a tray of oranges before him. Then Abednego walked up to him. "You again?" he queried. The boy nodded. "You know I forgot to ask you your name this morning," Abednego said. "Damien," he replied. "Wow, nice. What are you doing here?" Abednego queried. "I'm waiting for my mom. She went to buy water down there," he said, pointing towards the direction. "Okay, you look so dull and unhappy. What's wrong?" Abednego queried. "I'm hungry," he said. Then Abednego told his roadside food vendor to make noodles and tea for him. The guy brought the food after a few minutes, and Abednego handed it over to the little boy. As soon as he dropped the food beside him, his mom arrived. "That's my mom," he said. But there was something about his mom's appearance that Abednego can't explain. She was looking somehow gloomy, and to crown it all, she had 2 little bloodstains on her dress. She was looking so young, like someone in her late 20s. "Good day, Mom," Abednego greeted. "Good day, sir," she replied gently. "Sorry, you have bloodstains on your dress, I mean your stomach area. Are you okay?" Abednego queried. "Yes, I am okay in Christ," she replied, standing still with her gaze fixed. Abednego looked at Damien, her son. He hadn't touched his food, but there was something about his mom which Abednego was very sure of. His instincts never failed. "You look unhappy, Ma. Is anything the problem?" Abednego asked. She managed to smile. "No problems, sir. Thanks so much for your concern," she replied. Abednego nodded, but he was still not convinced. Then he turned to Damien. "You still haven't touched your food, little man." "But you said you were hungry," Abednego queried. "Yes, I am, but I can't eat all alone without my mum. She doesn't eat with me." "We haven't eaten together for months now," Damien said. Abednego turned to his mum upon hearing that. "Madam, why haven't you eaten with him for months now? I don't understand. Is it that you eat alone or you do not eat at all?" Abednego teased, laughing. "But on a serious note, why don't you eat with Damien?" he added. She smiled, I eat, but I don't eat his kind of food, she replied. Okay, you eat foods like? Abednego queried. She smiled again. Never mind, sir, she said. No, please, let me mind. Let me buy you something else, so you can at least eat with him, Abednego said. Never mind, sir. I'll eat later. God bless you, she said with her gaze still fixed. Abednego dipped his hand inside his pocket and brought out 1,000 naira from the money his friend gave him, and he stretched forth the money to her. Thanks so much for your kindness. You can give it to Damien, sir, she said. Okay, Abednego said, then handed the money to Damien. Uncle, thank you, Damien said. Then he grabbed the plate of food and started to devour it while his mum stood before him watching him eat. Damien, I'll see you some other time, Abednego said, bidding him and his mum farewell. Abednego kept looking back at both of them as he walked down the street. She didn't look like someone whom life was fair to, same as Damien, her son. Maybe selling oranges is her hustle, Abednego thought to himself. Abednego arrived home that day with thoughts of them. As soon as he entered his compound, he saw that his landlord's daughter coming out of their room in a very tight gown, revealing the shape of her frontier and her bright future. She started walking towards him, and he paused and started to smile sheepishly. He continued staring at her and smiling. Then her mum called her from inside, and she turned to answer her to properly reveal the shape of her bright future. He didn't bother to listen to what the mum had to say to her, because she said it at the top of her voice. He didn't want any distractions from what he was seeing and admiring. She turned again when the mum was done talking to her and started approaching again. He was still standing there, smiling like a lost sheep. Then she started rolling her eyes at him, with her long lashes like that of his grandfather's hand fan. Then she deliberately bumped into him. Please shift, let me pass, she fumed, pushing him aside. Oh, Lara, don't kill me, Abednego said, as she twisted her waist from side to side and her buttocks kept on colliding with each other as she walked. Chai, this girl is fine, a complete package, Abednego said, tapping his head 3 times while on his way to his own room. Then he finally arrived at his room to the smell of concoction rice made by Donatus. Guy, you can go and dish your food, Donatus said. I'm not hungry yet. When I'm hungry, I'll eat, Abednego said, undressing. No vex, Donatus replied, scooping the hot rice from his plate into his mouth. Remember that little boy I saw this morning? I saw him again on my way back with his mom, Abednego said. Donatus started laughing so hard. Woman-monger, don't tell me you've started falling for the woman again, because this your eyes and women are 5 and 6. Guy, stop, I'm serious this time. You needed to see the lady. She looked so unhappy, so gloomy, she couldn't even eat with her son when I bought him food. And do you know what baffles me the most? She had these 2 bloodstains on her dress. Ah, how? And she wasn't bleeding? Donatus queried. Not at all, just the bloodstains. I even called her attention to it, and she told me she was okay in Christ. What does that one mean? Abednego questioned. Okay, in Christ. I don't know what it means. Maybe she's a born again, Donatus said, chuckling. This is puzzling, Abednego let out. The following day, Abednego strolled out again to see his roadside food vendor. He asked him if Damien and his mum came around. Who is Damien? He queried. That little boy I asked you to make noodles for yesterday, Abednego said. Okay, no, I didn't see him. But who in his or her right senses would allow such a small boy to be selling oranges? Where's his mother? Did you ask him? Abednego's roadside food vendor queried. He was here with his mom yesterday, Abednego said. For real? I didn't see her. I even bought oranges from him the day before. I started seeing him here just 2 days ago," he added. Well, after taking noodles and a cup of tea, Abednego got a call from his friend Agada and asked him to meet him up at a bar somewhere. Abednego took a bus. He was in the bus when he saw the little boy walking down the street with a tray of oranges on his head while his mum walked behind him. Abednego quickly asked the bus driver to stop, paid him, alighted the bus, crossed the road to the other side, and went straight to them. "Damien, how are you?" "Madam, good day," Abednego greeted. "Isn't the sun too scorching for this?" Abednego queried. Then his phone rang. He brought out his phone from his pocket, but the phone slipped off his hand. He was picking it up when suddenly he looked in between his legs. He almost passed out due to what he saw. He looked up immediately, and then looked in between his legs again. Then he took to his heels. It happened that when Abednego looked in between his legs, he could no longer see Damien's mom. But when he looked up, there she was, standing right behind her son. Abednego ran as fast as his legs could carry him home without looking back. The way he threw open the door and dashed into the room made sleeping Donatus jerk up all of a sudden and start to look around. "Guy, what is it now? What's after you?" Donatus queried curiously, trying to force his eyes open. Abednego stood in the middle of the room panting, with a hand on his waist and the other on his chest. "Omo, I can't even explain what I saw. Oh, Guy, I'm scared," he let out, still panting heavily. "Talk to me now. What did you see?" Donatus questioned, now kneeling on the bed with eyes glued to him. "Remember that little boy?" Abednego queried. "Yes, the one you saw yesterday," Donatus asked. "Guy, his mom is a ghost." "Ghost? How?" Donatus probed. My phone fell off my hand when I was about bringing it out from my pocket when I had a call. I was picking it up from the ground when all of a sudden my eyes went in between my legs and I saw just the little boy standing without the mother. I raised my head, and there she was, but I wasn't properly convinced of what I saw. I bent over and looked in between my legs again and didn't see her. Guy, I took to my heels." Donatus's jaw dropped, and he was trying to close his mouth, but all attempts failed. Fear was immediately written all over his face. "Are you serious about this?" he summoned the courage to ask. "I swear." "That's serious. Maybe she's trying to protect the sun or something by following him around. But man, so scary. Hope they don't have our address because I don't like ghosts, oh?" he said, raising his hands. "You're a fool. Will you stop reasoning like a fool?" Abednego fumed. "Sorry, don't be angry," Donatus let out. All through that night, Abednego couldn't even close his eyes. He was so scared to his bones that he had to cover himself with a wrapper from his head down to his toes. The following day, Abednego strolled out again to his roadside food vendor's noodle spot. He went inside to sit unusually. He used to prefer sitting outside by the road before the spot, but he was now so scared of Damien and his mom. His roadside food vendor had already made him a plate of noodles and a cup of tea. Abednego was about sipping from the tea when he heard Uncle. He looked beside him. It was Damien with his mom standing behind him. Abednego flung the cup of tea into the air and made his way out through the other entrance. "Mr. Abednego! Mr. Abednego!" He heard his roadside food vendor call from afar, but at that moment, Abednego wished he could develop wings because he felt his pace wasn't fast enough despite the race. He even ran past Donatus by their gate, who stood there talking with Abednego's landlord's daughter. As soon as Abednego ran past him, Donatus dragged him back by his shirt and held him so tight in his arms like one who just caught a thief. "Abednego, calm down. Calm down," Donatus said, still holding Abednego in his arms, while Abednego's landlord's daughter stood before him with folded arms, waiting to hear what was after this guy that always disturbed her, he supposed. Abednego took Donatus aside and told him he saw the boy and his mom again, and Donatus held him by the hand like a little boy who had lost Mama's money, and then asked them to go back there so he could see for himself. Abednego refused initially, but after much persuasion, he agreed. They arrived at the food spot, but Damian and his mum were no longer there. "Oga, Abednego, what happened? Why did you run out of here like that? That little boy had been waiting to see you, but he just left." "To where?" Donatus queried. "I don't really know, but he went that way," the food vendor guy said, pointing towards a direction. "Guy, let's go and look for them," said Donatus, looking at Abednego. "Look for who? God forbid," Abednego said, snapping his fingers around his head. "I'm going back home," he added. "Is everything okay?" the food vendor queried, giving them a stern look. "Yes, fine," Abednego replied with a nod. Donatus ended up convincing Abednego again, and then they went in search of Damian and his mum. As soon as they entered the other street, Abednego saw Damian seated with his mother. He paused and took a few steps backward. They didn't see him. Then he pointed at them and showed them to Donatus. "There they are," Abednego said. "I'm seeing just a little boy," Donatus said. "How? Are you blind? You mean you can't see the lady beside him?" Abednego queried. "I swear I'm seeing just the little boy," he said again. Then Abednego put his 2 hands on his head. "I am finished," he said. "What have I gotten myself into? It's only in movies and novels I see things like this," Abednego lamented, with his hands still on his head. Then Damian turned all of a sudden to look at them. Donatus and Abednego both froze as they heard the word "uncle." Abednego sprinted home without one of his slippers, and Donatus met him home after like 30 minutes. Abednego couldn't go out for days, and finally decided to visit Agada's place for the first time. Agada was so happy to see Abednego in his beautiful house. His mom stayed with him. "Daddy," Abednego heard from the living room. "You have a child, or what am I hearing?" Abednego queried teasingly. "Yes now, oh, I never mentioned that to you," Agada said, grinning. Then the child walked into the living room, and lo and behold, it was Damian. "Holy Moses!" Abednego exclaimed. He was so shocked as goosebumps immediately filled the whole of his body from head to toe. He sat there with popped eyes and with his mouth agape, staring at the little boy. "Guy, are you okay?" Agada, who noticed the look on Abednego's face and how uneasy he became, queried, staring at him. Abednego was still staring at the little boy, but as soon as he heard Agada's voice, he turned swiftly and looked at him while swallowing saliva. "Abednego, are you okay?" Agada queried again. Abednego finally summoned the courage to say something. His body started to tremble, and at the same time, he was sweating profusely despite being under the AC. But as soon as he opened his mouth to say something, the bedroom door opened, and without finding out whoever it was, he flew over the couch and made his way out of the living room. He heard Agada screaming his name, but he forbade turning back. The only thing that resisted his exit from the compound was the locked gate. The security guy had already heard his boss screaming at the top of his voice. Without knowing whatever was going on, he had to lock the gate for security reasons. And as soon as he saw Abednego racing towards the gate, he opened his arms so wide and suddenly grabbed him. "Boss, I've caught him, thief! I've caught him!" he screamed continuously. Agada was already jogging out with his mom behind him. "Are you okay? Caught who? Come on, will you leave him alone?" He fumed at the security guy, who let go of Abednego immediately. "Sorry, sir. I thought he was a thief," he said, already on his knees. "Your father is a thief," Abednego raged with his trembling voice, opening his palms wide to slap him. "Guy, what's wrong? You scared me. Why did you run out as soon as my mom opened the living room door like that?" Agada queried. "Is he okay?" His mom too questioned. Abednego looked at him, stunned. "Was it your mom that opened the door?" said Abednego. "Yes, now," Agada exclaimed, nodding his head sporadically at the same time. "Where's your wife?" Abednego queried, still trembling. Agada sighed. "I mean the mother of the boy," Abednego added. Agada turned, locking stairs with his mom, then turned back. "Why?" he queried. "I hope all is well with your friend," his mom too queried. "Well, his mom died on the day of his delivery," Agada said. Then the little boy stepped outside and started walking towards them. "I'm doomed," Abednego muttered, while his teeth started to collide with each other out of fear. He looked behind the boy, hoping to see his ghost mum behind him. He had already calculated his next move, to fly over the fence, but the boy was walking towards them alone. Then he paused. "Andre, come, son," Agada called. Then Abednego's jaw dropped. "Andre?" he asked himself rhetorically. "Do you know my son?" Agada questioned, staring at him. "His name was never Damien. His name is Andre," Agada let out. "Sure?" Abednego questioned, and at this point, Agada's mom gave up on him. "Agada? Okay, oh," she exclaimed, then turned her back swiftly and walked back into the house. "Of course," Agada replied, still not convinced. "Does he sell oranges? I mean, hawk oranges. And does he have a twin?" Abednego queried, but he became surprised when the little boy didn't call him or run to him. "God forbid." "Guy, what's the meaning of all these now? The son of a rich boy like me hawk oranges." He, Agada said with a smile, while clapping his hands 3 times. "My son can never hawk oranges, and he doesn't have a twin. Now stop acting like someone who saw a ghost." "Exactly my point. See," Abednego was about to say when there came a knock on the gate. He turned swiftly towards the gate. "Who is that?" the security guy questioned. "Sarah," they heard. Then the security guy opened the gate for one fair, skinny-looking girl like that. "Hey, babes," Agada said, stretching forth his arms for a hug. Agada introduced Abednego and Sarah to each other. Sarah was his girlfriend, but Abednego must confess, despite him being in such a state, he still had his eyes and senses intact. Agada doesn't have good eyes, Shah. The girl had no frontier and no bright future. She stood there so flat, like Abednego's primary school chalkboard. Well, Abednego had to discharge himself, but found it so difficult to comprehend all he was told. Abednego got home that day and narrated everything to Donatus, and how the little boy didn't even recognize him. "Omo, that Agada of a guy is not pure. If all you said is true, then something is wrong somewhere. Or is the little boy a twin?" Donatus said. "You needed to have seen that Agada's son, so identical with that little boy Damien. But what baffles me is, why am I the only one seeing the lady behind Damien? And is Damien a twin?" "My friend, you have a mission ahead of you," Donatus said, laughing. "How?" Abednego queried with hands on his waist, staring at Donatus like a lost rooster. "Yes, now, you're the only one seeing her. That means there are some things she would want you to do for her, perhaps talk to you or something," Donatus said. "Things she would want me to do for her? As in, how?" Am I Merlin the actor? I would advise you to try and pause the next time you see her and her son. Act like a man and ask her some few questions. Guy, you well? Ask a ghost a few questions? Wait, oh, did you smoke that your thing again? Abednego queried with 2 fingers on his lips. Your papa, Donatus said. The following day, Donatus and Abednego contributed some money so Abednego could go get foodstuffs with it, while Donatus left earlier for an interview. Abednego walked past their landlord's flat, staring at the door and beaming with smiles. Passing through their flat always sent chills down Abednego's spine. He wished his landlord's daughter could just open the door. If only wishes were horses. He kept turning back as he approached the gate, hoping to at least see her. As soon as he opened the gate, he saw Donatus outside the gate, seated with Damien and peeling oranges. And there his mum was again, standing before them with her gaze fixed. "Uncle!" Damien called. Abednego looked at him, and then passed out. Abednego woke up like 30 minutes later in their bed. He scanned everywhere within a second as soon as he opened his eyes. "Guy, what happened?" Abednego queried in a low tone when he sighted Donatus. Donatus was seated right beside him. He rolled his eyes at Abednego and let out a loud and long hiss. "Get out, Abeg. So if you were asked to raise your hand where men are raising their hands, you would do so?" Donatus queried. As soon as he made that statement, the whole incident replayed in Abednego's head. "Ghost! Ghost!" Abednego screamed, ran to the back of the bed and shielded himself with a pillow. "Chai, but how did our paths ever cross? In fact, I think I will start calling you Francisca, henceforth because you have 0 attributes of a man." Donatus lamented, with hands on his waist, staring at Abednego and shaking his head. "Me too, I'll start calling you Patricia. You're only saying this because I'm the only one seeing the ghost lady. If not for your gullibility and foolishness, you knew I was scared of the little boy and his mum. Yet you still brought them home to buy oranges from them. The food you eat is too much, that's why you lack sense. Are they the only ones selling oranges around here?" Abednego queried, crawling out of his hiding. "I brought the little boy here on purpose. If you hadn't come out, I would have called you out. Why can't you just man up and ask the lady a few questions, since you're the only one seeing her?" said Donatus. "Guy, you won't understand. I can't stand a ghost. Don't you get it? Please, I don't want any ghost troubles," Abednego said, waving his hand. "But just try and talk to her. She must have been through a whole lot before her death." "I can't. In fact, I'm not sleeping in this room with you tonight. You were the one who brought them home, so you'll sleep here alone. Let me go somewhere else and sleep," Abednego fumed. Donatus let out a very hard laughter. "You think I'm afraid of ghosts? I can even sleep in this whole compound alone, let me tell you," Donatus bragged. "Get out!" Abednego fumed, pushing him aside. That night, Abednego couldn't even go elsewhere to sleep because he didn't want Donatus to see him as a coward. He laid down behind Donatus, but from his head to his toes was covered with a wrapper. Though he couldn't sleep that night, he pondered on what Donatus had said and decided to confront the ghost lady. The following day, after having his bath, Abednego strolled to that roadside food vendor's spot, hoping to see Damien, but he waited for hours and didn't see him. He even checked some streets around, still couldn't find him. The following day again, Abednego went in search of Damien, even the day after, the same thing. Then he remembered where he had found Damien the first time they met. The boy pointed a house close by to him and told him it was their house. Abednego summoned some courage and went there alone, and made the sign of the cross before entering the compound. He met a chubby-looking woman in her early 40s sitting under a tree breaking melon. he greeted her and told her he was looking for Damien. "You want to buy oranges?" she queried. Abednego almost nodded, but he told her instead that he was there to say hi to Damien. "Ah, just like that?" she queried. "Yes, Ma. I always buy oranges from him, so I was passing through and decided to say hi. He's such a cute little boy," Abednego said, smiling. Then she screamed Damien's name at the top of her voice. "Uncle!" Damien called as soon as he saw Abednego beaming with smiles. Abednego almost peed in his pants. He was there praying so hard not to see the ghost lady, even though that was what brought him there. But he wasn't sure if he was ready to face the ghost. "Uncle, you came to our house," Damien said. Abednego nodded. He was already wearing a frightened look. "How are you?" Abednego managed to ask, and Damien responded that he was fine. Abednego asked him why he hadn't been selling oranges, and Damien told him his auntie had travelled. She returned that same morning and that he would sell oranges the next day. "Oh, that's your aunt?" Abednego queried, pointing at her. The woman smiled broadly on hearing that, nodding sporadically. She was looking at Abednego like one rich dude with his borrowed sneakers from Donatus, the only thing Donatus bought with the money inherited from his late father. The idiot spent all on drinks, party and women. He's now trekking up and down from one job interview to another. Abednego told Damien he would see him the following day and then bade them farewell. The following day, Abednego was already at the noodles spot, and after waiting for like an hour, Damien showed up, and this time without his mum. "Where's your mum?" Abednego questioned, looking around. "I haven't seen her today," Damien said. "Why?" Abednego queried, confused. "It's like that sometimes," Damien said. "Chai, fuck up!" Abednego let out with a finger on his lips. "You want to see my mum?" Damien queried with heart-melting smiles. Yes, please," Abednego said, stuttering. "Mum, can you please show up now? I'm bored and lonely," Damien said. Before Abednego knew what was happening, Damien's mum appeared, standing behind him. Abednego began to shiver. So if you love horror and supernatural fiction narrative and want a part 2, then write continue in the comments section and subscribe to our second YouTube page, where we will be posting the remaining episodes and other stories of this kind. Thanks for watching. "Where's your mum?" Abednego questioned, looking around. "I haven't seen her today," Damien said. "Why?" Abednego queried, confused. "It's like that sometimes," Damien said. "Chai, up!" Abednego let out with a finger on his lips. "You want to see my mum?" Damien queried with heart-melting smiles. Yes, please," Abednego said, stuttering. "Mum, can you please show up now? I'm bored and lonely," Damien said. Before Abednego knew what was happening, Damien's mum appeared, standing behind him. Abednego began to shiver. If one had opened Abednego's head at that moment, he was inwardly screaming. But he had to comport himself, because his friend, the roadside food vendor, was inside his spot, and there were a few people around. His legs became so numb that he couldn't raise even one of them. The only thing he did was raise one of his hands and cover his eyes with it while his heart continued pounding, and his whole body shivered. "Please, I beg you, hear me out," she pleaded. He nodded sporadically, still covering his eyes. "Please calm down. I won't harm you. Just drop your hand and feel relaxed. You won't regret this encounter, I promise you," she said. He moved 2 middle fingers from his eyes and looked at her through the space. "Please drop your hand. Just feel free," she repeated. Then slowly, he dropped his hand, but his heart continued pounding non-stop, and he still couldn't look at her. "Why am I the only one seeing you?" he queried, still trembling with his face aside. "You're the only one seeing her because she's an angel, and because you have a pure heart," Damien said with a broad smile. The ghost lady then smiled too. "Yes, because your heart is very pure," she said. "Are you guys kidding me?" he thought to himself. What do you want from me?" he queried with his shaky voice. "Please help me return my child to my village. He needs to go back home to my mother. I don't want him to stay here with my elder sister anymore," she said, crying, but no tears were dropping. At that moment, he realized that he had been brainwashed all these years. In local movies, their ghosts usually cried, shedding serious tears. Some even crossed busy highways, looking left and right. But why? Do you want him returned back to the village?" he queried, stammering. "He's suffering here. My sister barely has time for him. She doesn't feed him, and he doesn't go to school. If he were to be in the village with my mother, he wouldn't have been going through all these. He's not well taken care of here. That's why he hawks oranges during school hours. And that's why you see me following him around to always protect him," she added. "Wait, is your son a twin?" he queried. She sighed. "When you get to the village, my mum will tell you all you need to know. Will you help me, please?" "Please," Damien said, giving him that innocent stare. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Thank you," she said, beaming with smiles. Then, two guys walked out of the spot, staring at him with their mouths open. Come and see him," one of them said. Abednego became scared and uncomfortable. "What is it?" he queried, looking at each of them. "They say you've been talking to yourself," said his friend, the roadside food vendor, pointing at the guys. "Who said?" Abednego queried with a straight face. "These people," he said, pointing at the guys. "But it's true. Weren't you talking to yourself?" one of the guys queried. He looked at them and hissed, took Damien's tray of oranges, and also took him by the hand. They left that place while his mum followed, walking upright without swinging her hands. Those guys intended to make him seem like a fool, but he escaped their folly. He took Damien to the end of the street and then turned to his mom, looking into her eyes for the first time. "When do I take him?" he queried. "This weekend," she said. "But what do I tell your sister before taking him?" "Don't worry, she's not always home on weekends. She's always too busy partying. When you're ready to go, just go to any ATM machine and input my PIN, take 100K and give my mum 50K. There's another girl that stays with my sister. Just tell her you want to go with Damien to buy him something," she said, then called out her ATM PIN and also the mother's address in the village. His jaw dropped. "Without an ATM card?" he quizzed, and she nodded. "Wow, savvy ghost with dealings," he thought to himself. "I don't understand. The money, I'm sorry to say, but I hope the money is not from the land of the dead?" he queried, gazing at her. She smiled. "Not at all. My mum will tell you everything," she said again with her gaze fixed. He nodded. Then he told Damien to get ready, that he was going to come for him on Saturday morning. When he arrived home, he narrated everything to Donatus. "Finally, you two are afraid. What if you hadn't waited to hear what she had to say? But Guy, please withdraw the money and give me my cut," he said. "Look at this fool. I'm here thinking of how to go and withdraw that money. Money from a ghost. And you're here telling me about your cut. You're not even afraid." "Afraid of what? Am I responsible for her death? please withdraw and cut me my share, please?" "Ha! I don't even think I'll go to withdraw that money. I don't want any ghost money. It's like I'll look for money somehow and help her take her child to the village," he said. "Look for money? Where? You're a disappointment. Better do what she asked you to do." "Woman, man," Donatus teased. "But how did she even come about that kind of money? Man, the last time I saw that kind of money was when my father died," Donatus added, shaking his head. "Shaking your head at your foolishness, right? You inherited 500k from that man, and the only thing you could get from that money was a pair of those white sneakers," he said, pointing at the sneakers Donatus kept in a corner of the room. "A whole 500k just vanished like that on top of drinks and women. Here you are now, you can't even boast of a common 500 naira, he said, laughing hard. Do you have 500 naira like this?" Donatus fumed angrily, but Abednego ignored him and continued laughing. That same evening, Abednego decided to go and withdraw the money. He met some people who were also there to withdraw money, and he had to wait until the last person left because he didn't want anyone to witness the miracle he was about to perform, taking money without an ATM card. As soon as he input the PIN, the money came out almost immediately. "What a wonder!" he exclaimed with his mouth agape, taking the money. Well, that Saturday, very early, he went to pick Damien up. They arrived at the park and boarded a bus to their village. They arrived there around 12 p.m., quite a far distance. They entered the compound, and he saw an old woman plucking pumpkin leaves by the fence. As soon as Damien saw her, he withdrew his hand from Abednego's all of a sudden, screaming, "Grandma!" As soon as the woman turned and saw him, she threw the pumpkin leaves into the air, and both of them ran toward each other. Abednego didn't cry, but this scenario brought tears to his eyes as he brought out his handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his tears. But as soon as he wiped his tears with it, he noticed that it was the handkerchief for protection his parish priest had given them during the New Year's Vigil Mass. He looked at it, folded it neatly, made the sign of the cross, and then put it back in his pocket. Let me not use the handkerchief carelessly, in case the ghost will want to change her mind and stop being nice to me. This one, I'm in her village, he said to himself in a low tone. They hugged each other so tightly. "My dear son," the woman said, rubbing his head amid tears. He stood there looking around. It was such a beautiful bungalow with flowers everywhere. But in this part of the world, no matter how beautiful an old woman's house is, there must be something to remind you that it's an old woman's house. Of all the places in the compound, the old woman did not see anywhere to plant pumpkin leaves but the frontage. After a few seconds of hugging each other, the woman turned to Abednego. "Good day, my dear. Please, who are you?" she probed. He cleared his throat. "My name is Abednego, Ma, Damien's friend," he said with a smile, pointing at him. "Okay, so where and how did you find him?" she queried again. "Was he missing?" he questioned, popping his eyes. "Not at all," she said. "It's just that," she said, and then sighed. "Forgive my manners. Please come inside," she added. "I hope this woman is not planning to call the police. If the little boy was missing, please tell me now. Let me know how to escape from here," he thought to himself, already fidgeting. She ushered them in and asked Abednego to sit, and then carried Damien on her lap. As soon as he sat on the couch, he asked her again, "Ma, please, was Damien missing?" She sighed again. "You see, Damien wasn't missing. It's just that it's a long story. I don't know if you're in such a hurry to leave. Let me quickly make something for you to eat," she said. He had wanted to go back after hearing the full story about the ghost lady, but as soon as he heard the word food, he relaxed himself on the couch. "It's true. I think I should eat first so that whatever she has to say will sink well," he soliloquized. Damien and his grandmother were already bonding so well. Whenever the old woman came into the living room to greet him, he would think maybe she was with a plate of food and end up being disappointed when she wasn't carrying any. 2 hours later, she finally came in with a tray of fufu and egusi soup. He sat up as soon as he saw her with the food, swallowing saliva. "So sorry it took me so long," she said, smiling. "Ah, Mama, no problems at all," he said, grinning. Then she excused herself. As soon as she left, he dragged the tray forward and started devouring the food. The only place he had tasted that type of egusi soup was in his mother's house, and it was usually during Christmas. He used his finger to count the pieces of meat in the soup. It was 5 altogether, with 2 capomo and stock fish. "Ah, these people are really enjoying here. Oh, I wonder what Donatus will be eating at home. Maybe Iba and that leftover oak crow without fish, or even Gary with that 20 naira milk and sugar without groundnut. If not that the ghost is from this house, I would have stylishly slept over, pretending to be tired, then have breakfast tomorrow before leaving. What if I decide to pass the night here now and then, boom? She appears in the middle of the night. Man, see food," he muttered, still moulding the second morsel of fufu in his hand. After eating, he relaxed on the couch. Now his eyes and ears were fully open to see and hear things clearly. He got up and started watching the portraits on the wall. The woman walked in, saw him, and started smiling as she sat on the couch. Then she called a girl about 10 years old, staying with her, to go to her room and bring more pictures. She made him sit beside her and started showing him the people in those pictures, even though he didn't even know them. Then he saw a wedding picture. It was that of the ghost lady and her husband on their wedding day. "Annabelle, my dearest daughter, may your soul continue to rest in peace," she said, staring at the picture. "Ma, I'm so scared to say this, but I saw your daughter's ghost and she gave me some money to give to you." "My dear, I saw her in my dreams last night and she told me you were bringing her son. So I had been expecting you," she said. "Wow," he exclaimed. "Ma, please, what really happened to her? And is Damien a twin?" "One question at a time," she said, and then continued. "My daughter was murdered in cold blood by her husband. She was murdered when she was 8 months pregnant. A fight ensued between her and her husband one day, and the young man ended up stabbing her in the stomach twice, right before her mother-in-law." "What? A heavily pregnant woman?" he queried with his mouth agape. She nodded. "My daughter was very wealthy despite being very young. In fact, she built this house I'm in. Before her husband got married to her, he had nothing, so she made him the head of her company. He started lavishing money here and there, living a flamboyant lifestyle. My daughter confronted him one day about his lifestyle, and the husband killed her in his mother's presence, and they took everything she had," she said, shaking her head. "How do you know all these?" he queried curiously. She smiled. "Even at the hospital she couldn't utter a word before she passed, so I didn't know what happened to her, and the husband refused to say anything to me. All I knew was that she was stabbed. Nobody told me who did it or where it was done. She appeared in my dream 3 days after she died and told me everything. So on the day she was to be buried, I put a knife in her hand and told her to fight for herself, because I had no one to fight for me, except God. So after 7 days of burying her, the husband was stabbed in his sleep and died after he confessed." "Unbelievable. Ma, What about her pregnancy? He queried with curiosity. Damien is a twin. My daughter was operated upon that very day she was stabbed. I was the only one with her in the theatre because her mother-in-law called me shortly after the fight that I should come and be with her in the hospital. I was so shocked that I left here with just my clothes on without my handbag. The doctors later brought out 2 boys from her womb, but I had to plead with the doctor to help tell the husband that she had just 1 child, and then I told him my reasons. The doctor complied and had to hide the other child for me, which is Damien. If the mother-in-law and her son had known that they were twins, they would have taken them both from me and then prevented me from seeing them, just like they are doing now with the other twin. This is so terrible, he exclaimed. But when all that happened, did you people inform the police? He queried. A helpless widow like me call the police on those influential people? She asked, and then giggled. No, I didn't, she added. What about Damien's mum's elder sister? The one Damien was staying with. Why wasn't she taking care of him? I don't know if you have any idea. And why was she in custody of Damien instead of you? Please make me understand, Ma. She smiled. When my daughter Annabelle died, one of her friends was owing her the sum of 7 million naira before she died. So after she passed, her friend brought the money to me instead of her husband, and my eldest daughter was around when she brought the money. So she told me she was going to take Damien along with her to the city so she could take proper care of him. She made me give her the sum of 5 million naira out of the money that she was going to open a mini-mart. I never knew that Damien was in the city with her suffering. Whenever they were coming home for Christmas, she would buy him the best clothes and would always give him money so as to shut him up from letting me know. But when Annabelle appeared to me in my dreams recently, she told me you were bringing her son and that he was going through so much in the hands of her elder sister. I believed her because even when my eldest daughter was still in the village, all she knew how to do was attend parties and run after men. I really felt for Damien. I couldn't stop crying as soon as I woke up from sleep. He didn't even know when tears started dripping from his eyes. He mistakenly brought out the handkerchief their parish priest had given them again to wipe his tears, and after noticing, he folded it neatly again and put it back in his pocket. I just thank God for everything, my dear, she said with a smile. Ma, have you visited Damien's twin lately? I mean, do you know where your daughter's mother-in-law stays in the city? He queried. The last time I visited was when they were both a year old. It wasn't funny. The mother-in-law chased me out like a common thief. I later heard she moved out of the house my daughter bought and stayed with her husband. She did not only relocate, she sold the house and got married to a younger man. He paused. You mean the mother-in-law remarried? He queried. Yes, she did. Wonderful, he exclaimed. Ma, I visited my friend a few days back. I'd already met Damien before then, and then I met his son. At first I thought it was Damien, and my friend told me that he was the father of the boy, so I'm confused. The old woman stood up all of a sudden, shocked. Where did you see him? And he told you he was the father of the boy. Are you sure it was Damien's twin you saw? She questioned with curiosity. They look so much alike, Ma. Please, do you have the picture of the said boy? How do I see him? She queried. No, I don't have his picture. But I'll visit my friend one of these days and see what I can do about taking the boy's picture, then come back here, he assured. Oh, thank you. God bless you, she said. After like an hour, he finally got up to leave. Uncle, please don't go, Damien begged. Can't you just stay till morning before travelling back? The old woman queried with a smile. Stay till morning? No way. He didn't want to take chances. That ghost might come visiting in the night. And in this kind of house, it's only you that will sleep in one whole room. Ma, I would have loved to stay. Oh, in fact, have the taste of that egusi soup again, you know? He said, scratching his head and grinning. Oh, you like it? Wait, let me package some for you, she said, hurrying to the kitchen. His jaw dropped in awe. What? That sweet egusi soup? Let me go and use it to show off to Donatus first, he muttered, so elated, adjusting himself on the couch. He got home that day around 10 p.m, and then he knocked on the door several times, but there was no response. Who is that now? Donatus finally queried after some time. Your father! Open the door! Abednego yelled. Donatus finally opened the door halfway after another round of knocks, and then stood by the door. Guy, what is it now? Open this door, let me go in and rest, please, I'm tired. Abednego! Wait now, You see, I have an important guest. Can you please use some change out of that money and go rent a cheap hotel? I'll gist you in the morning, he said, grinning. Your father's buttocks. The room that I rented with my money. I should go and waste money renting a hotel because you have a woman in there. Open this door, my friend, Abednego said, forcing the door open. Lo and behold, it was his landlord's daughter, that girl he had been crushing on, who was in bed with Donatus. She became so embarrassed as soon as she saw Abednego, and then covered her face with her hands. He then turned to Donatus. Donatus, I'm ashamed of you, but you condemned me when you saw the way I always admired her. So this was your plan? He thundered, as Donatus threw his face aside. Then he turned and looked at his landlord's daughter. So you are even this cheap? He queried. He dropped his bag, unzipped it, and carried the container containing his soup. And then he dashed out of the room and went outside the gate to sit. He was licking the soup and surfing the net at the same time. Then he saw an uploaded picture of an old friend and coursemate, and he gave him a call after like 3 years. He was so happy to hear from Abednego again, and they talked about so many things. And then he decided to ask him about Agada, their friend. Abednego told him he ran into him, even visited his fine house. Don't mind Agada. Ever since he married that his sugar mummy, he barely has time for us. Oh, you're even lucky he's bonding with you, he revealed. Abednego became stunned. Was this guy talking about Agada or someone else? You mean Agada Martins? He queried, dropping the soup on the ground. Yes, nah, you didn't know, he questioned, giggling. Are you sure? Because the last time I went to his house, I met him and his mum, and he told me his wife was late. Agada? Forget that guy. Have you forgotten that he lost his mom when we were in school? That woman you saw is his sugar mummy. Then he remembered all of a sudden that they even contributed money for him when he lost his mom in school. Lord have mercy, he exclaimed. It's not as if Agada has a dime to his name. That guy has no kobo. He's only depending on that his sugar mummy for survival, his friend said on the phone. So unbelievable, Abednego let out. You have to believe it, man. Well, we'll talk better tomorrow, he said. Then they said their goodbyes. He sat there, staring at his soup, and it was staring back at him. The only thing running through his mind was why Agada had to lie to him that the woman was his mother. Well, he reached for his container of soup, sitting comfortably on the ground, and went inside to warm it so he would use it tomorrow. The kind of meat that woman loaded in the plate of soup is not something to just sit and eat in one night. Let me not be as useless as Donatus, who spent 500k in just a few days on nothing. I would just buy 2 wraps of fufu in the morning for me alone, minus Donatus, because that guy is no better person," he muttered as he opened his door, ignoring Donatus, who sat on the bed looking like a lost sheep. He turned on the gas and poured the soup into a pot, then placed it on the gas. "Guy, is that soup?" Donatus queried, hurrying out of bed. "No, it's not soup. It's kunu, a local drink. Please get out," he fumed. Are you still angry? You know I'm not always like that. I swear she used some love potion on me," he lamented. "You see your life? So the love potion brought you two into my room and made you both sit on my bed, and then undressed you both. I just pity you. See infection," he said with his hands on his waist, waiting for his soup to boil. "Okay, I'm so sorry, please forgive me," Donatus begged. "Why are you begging me as if I'm your girlfriend? Nothing concerns me. Oh, my advice for you is just to be careful," he said. I will, Donatus said with a hand placed on his chest. Abednego nodded. "Please, how many fufu wraps did you buy? Will it be enough for both of us?" he said, peeping inside the pot. "Is that agusi soup you bought? You know I don't like agusi. You should have bought ogbono or vegetable soup, nah. But no problem, I'll manage it," he said, rushing to bring a plate. He brought it and then stretched it forth. Abednego then turned and looked at him. "Guy, put soup for me. Nah, let me eat." "Why are you staring at me like that? You've never seen a black Indian boy before," he queried, grinning. "Wait, Donna, you're a fool. You even have a choice. I should have bought vegetable soup because of you. Are you that important?" "My friend, I did not buy fufu. Do you even know where I brought the soup from? Woman matters will not allow you to have sense." Donatus withdrew his hand immediately. "First of all, don't call me Dona. Someone might hear you and think you're referring to some local boy. If you didn't buy the soup, where did you bring it from?" he questioned. "If you must know, I brought it from where I went." Donatus tapped him 3 times. "Wait, I forgot. How did it go? Wait, was it there they gave you this kind of soup?" he queried, taking a look at the boiling soup again. "No, it's from your father's house," Abednego replied, turning off the gas. "Ha! Anyway, me, I'll eat it." "Oh," he said, stretching forth the plate again. Abednego scooped just a tablespoonful of soup into his plate and then covered the pot. "I don't understand. Even a newborn baby can't use this kind of small soup. Add more for me, please," he said. Abednego added another spoonful, carried the pot, went and dropped it beside his pillow on the bed. "Guy, what a pity. You should have just used the pot in place of a pillow," he said, looking into his plate. "It's none of your business," Abednego said, laying on the bed. The following day in the afternoon, he gave Agada a call and told him he was coming over. He got to the house, and after sitting for a few minutes, he asked after his son and asked him to call him out into the living room to say hi to him. Agada smiled. Okay, he said. Then he called him, and the boy came running into the living room. He looked exactly like Damien. "Was it not the uncle that ran out of here the other day because he had a running stomach?" he queried with his British accent, pointing at Abednego. Agada started laughing, and Abednego's eyes popped open. "Who told you that?" he queried. "My dad," he said. Abednego then turned to Agada. "Fool man," he said, throwing a pillow at him. Then he started bonding with the little boy gradually and asking him some few questions about school and his friends. He stylishly brought out his phone and started playing a game. He was interested in playing too, but Abednego told him that not until he took his pictures, and he hurried up and posed before him. doing a peace sign with his fingers. Agada was just there, smiling sheepishly. If only he knew what was ahead of him, he wouldn't be sitting so comfortably. Abednego took his pictures and he felt like someone who had just won $1 million. After like 2 hours, Agada asked them to hang out somewhere. They finally arrived at a bar. "Guy, why did you lie to me?" Abednego queried, staring at him. "How?" Agada questioned, munching the fried meat in his mouth. "You and I know that your mum died months ago." He got stunned, reached for his handkerchief, and wiped his mouth with it. "Guy, I had to do what I had to do. Sorry, I lied. You know, if you want to survive in this Lagos, you need to have sense," he said. "How do you mean?" Abednego queried with curiosity. "It's not that I love the woman. I'm just after their money," he revealed. "But you told me that the boy was your son." "I lied. Oh. I'm just pretending to them, like I love them. The little boy is the woman's grandson. All their properties are in the little boy's name. And me, I'm waiting to get hold of the documents first. Once I get the documents, I'm gone," he said, hissing. Abednego couldn't believe what he heard. He was dumbfounded. "But do you think that's the right thing to do?" he queried. "To me it is. A man needs to survive, you know," he said, sipping from the beer in his cup. Abednego nodded. They both finished taking their drinks, and then, after a few minutes, Agada dropped him off at home. As soon as he arrived home, he narrated everything to Donatus. "I've always known that Agada guy is not a sincere person, so once he gets hold of those documents, he'll be out of their lives," Donatus queried with a hand under his jaw. "So he said." "So what's your plan?" he queried. "I'll just travel down to that woman's village this weekend to show her the little boy's pictures I took, and then tell her the situation of things." Donatus nodded. Abednego went out for an interview the following day, came back home, tired and exhausted. He was about to open his door when he started hearing Donatus's voice with that of his landlord's daughter. "I'm sorry. I cannot terminate this pregnancy. You have to take full responsibility," she said. "But how? You know I'm jobless and don't even have a dime. The earlier you do this for both of us, the better. Just take a look at you. You're still so young. You want to have a child whom you don't even have a dime to cater for. I'm not ready to become a father yet, so just help yourself to help us." Donatus fumed. He froze and was shocked at the same time. "Donatus has killed me," he muttered with his 2 hands on his head. He thought of opening the door, but had to tiptoe out of there. He went outside the gate and sat there for a while, thinking about what he had just heard. A few minutes later, Donatus came outside and saw him. "Ah, Guy, when did you come?" he queried. Abednego turned and looked at him from head to toe, got up and went back in without uttering a word until he finally travelled. That weekend, he decided to go to the old woman's village. As soon as he entered the compound, Damien came running to him from the inside, like he knew Abednego was coming. "I knew you were going to come today," he said, beaming with smiles. "Who told you I was going to come?" Abednego questioned, holding his hand. "My mom," he said. "Oh, I forgot. Nothing is hidden from you," Abednego teased, and Damien giggled. Then they entered the living room. "Where's Mama?" Abednego asked, sitting on the couch. "She went to the market. She'll soon be back," he said. Then Abednego brought out his phone and started showing Damien pictures of the other boy, Andre. "Who is this?" Abednego asked, showing him the pictures. "Me," Damien screamed with a hand placed on his chest. Then he looked at Abednego, squeezing his face. "But I don't have such clothes. How did you put those clothes on my body?" Abednego smiled. Then the living room door came open. It was the grandmother. He stood up immediately, bowing his head. She immediately threw the bag she was carrying aside as soon as she saw him. "My son, you came back," she said with a smile, then gave him a hug. "Do you have the pictures with you?" she queried, stretching forth her hand. Then Abednego brought forth his phone and showed her the pictures. She burst into tears. "Oh, my son, he's my grandson," she said, looking sternly at the pictures. "Please, how do I see him? I need to see him," she begged. "Ma, don't worry. As soon as I'm through with what I'm doing, you'll see him," Abednego said with a smile. Then Damien walked up to his grandmother and collected the phone from her, looking at the pictures. "Grandma, why are you crying? Who is he?" he queried. "He's your brother," the grandmother said, smiling. "My brother? Do I have a brother?" Damien queried. "Don't worry, son. When the time comes, everything will be clearer to you at the right time," she said. Damien nodded. Abednego decided to sleep over this time. They had one very delicious jollof rice for dinner. He purposely left a small portion of rice in his plate so he could take it to his room that night and eat it later. He woke up around past 11 p.m. and finished the food. He would wake up again in the middle of the night to sniff the plate of rice and then go back to sleep. He kept wondering if the old woman had studied culinary arts in school as he lay on the bed. The following day, when he wanted to leave, she gave him some money. He didn't want to take it, but she forced him, and you know it's not good to reject money, so he had to take it. He travelled back, and as soon as he entered their gate, he started hearing screams and weeps coming from their landlord's house. He went straight there and asked one of their neighbours whom he met there what was going on, and she told him that his landlord's daughter had died. He was shocked. "What happened?" he managed to ask. "Abortion. No one knows who got her pregnant," she said. His heart was almost in his mouth, and he almost choked on his saliva as soon as he heard that. He left there without uttering a word, and then went inside the house to give Donatus a piece of his mind. He threw the unlocked door open, but Donatus wasn't inside. He sat on the bed and saw a note on the bed which read, "Abednego. So sorry, man. You're a very good man. Hope you know that. But I'm so sorry I had to take Agada's number from your phone and told him about your plans. Sold you out for 350k. I needed the money, man. Please forgive me. I will advise you to leave the house for your safety. I have gone back to my hometown. I'm sorry." His heart shattered into tiny pieces. So if you love horror and supernatural fiction narrative, then write continue in the comments section and subscribe to our second YouTube page, where we will be posting the remaining episodes and other stories of this kind. Thanks for watching. For a few seconds, Abednego held onto the note, squeezing it in his palm while hot tears rolled down his face. He had never known that Donatus could betray him in such a way. He sat on his bed, thinking about how much he had told Donatus and how much the other man knew. Abednego's heart kept pounding while he bit his lips in anguish without feeling any pain. "Where is he? Where is that idiot boy?" a voice said, approaching Abednego's room and thundering. "Who could that be?" Abednego queried to himself as his whole body started to shiver. Then there came bangs on his door. "Open this door, useless boy," he heard. It was then that Abednego knew it was the voice of his landlord. The man said it, banging repeatedly on the door. Abednego managed to get up, walked slowly to the door and unbolted it with his shivering hand. Then he saw the landlord standing with 2 other men. "Goo! Good day, sir," Abednego stuttered, bowing his head. "Where is that foolish friend of yours? Where is he?" the landlord queried, thundering. His thundering voice immediately threw Abednego off balance, and his legs became so numb. "Sir, he has gone back to his hometown. I swear I know nothing about the death of your daughter. It was Donatus who impregnated her, sir. I don't have a hand in it," Abednego said with fear written all over his face. The landlord's jaw dropped immediately, popping his eyes like one who'd gone blind. "Donatus impregnated my daughter. Could it be that he was the one who took her for an abortion and then absconded after she died?" he queried, pointing into the air. "I am finished. This boy has killed me," he let out, dropping a tear with 2 hands on his head. "I never knew my daughter was pregnant until her death. I only came with these men. They are electric providing officials. I had given Donatus money since yesterday morning to help pay the electricity bill. Now the officials have come for disconnection, telling me that Donatus didn't show up at their office. That's why I'm here. But hearing this now has left me dumbfounded," he said, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "What a pity, boys of nowadays," one of the officials said, shaking his head. "My brother, see my life. These boys I took as my sons, see how they ended up ruining my life," the landlord said, bringing out his phone. "If it's what I'm thinking, then I'm finished," Abednego soliloquized. The landlord ended up calling the police, turning a deaf ear to Abednego's plea. He locked up Abednego's room, and they both waited outside in the compound for the police, who arrived after like 30 minutes, and Abednego was whisked away like a common criminal. They locked him up and asked him to provide Donatus. Then he would be released. Abednego begged them, telling them that Donatus had already left the house. But he was told that bringing Donatus would only facilitate his release, so he had no other option than to take the landlord and some officers all the way down to Donatus's hometown. Abednego had been there just once for Donatus's sister's wedding, but he still managed to find his way there after 4 years. They got to their compound, meeting Donatus's mom and 2 sisters outside. She got up all of a sudden as soon as she saw Abednego in cuffs and in the company of some officers, and started walking towards them while her 2 daughters followed. "Isn't this Donatus's friend?" she questioned, panicking. "Yes, Mom," Abednego said, then greeted her. He narrated what happened, and she told him that she hadn't set her eyes on Donatus for 2 years now. Donatus had played Abednego. Abednego didn't even know what he had done wrong to this guy to warrant that kind of betrayal. He stood there, hopeless and helpless, while hot tears rolled down his cheeks. What will I tell my mother happened?" Abednego muttered in tears. "Officers, let's go. He knows the whereabouts of his friend and he will confess after so much torture. And if he fails to confess, let him rot in jail," the landlord fumed. "Ah, Baba, please, I don't know anything. Baba, please, I'm innocent," Abednego begged on his knees. "Officers, take him," the landlord thundered again, turning his back. One of the officers held Abednego's trousers and started dragging him. "Sir, please, I'm innocent," Abednego begged amidst tears. He looked back and said to Donatus's mother, "Mama, please help me beg them." Then Abednego looked forward all of a sudden and saw the ghost lady standing right beside the police car. He was startled and he paused all of a sudden. He was the only one who saw her, so he tried as much as possible not to make them suspect anything. She raised her hand, drew a circle in the air, and then disappeared. I don't understand. Is this ghost okay? Was that the only thing she could do to help? I'm doomed, Abednego thought to himself. My friend, move! One of the officers yelled at him. Then the landlord, who was walking ahead of them, paused all of a sudden and then turned back. Officers, please release the boy. You can take Donatus's mom instead, he said. Sir? One of the officers questioned to be sure of what he had heard, and the landlord repeated the same thing. Abednego was let go of immediately, and they went ahead to take Donatus's mother and then put her in their car. Abednego, please come into the car, let's drop you home. Please, said the landlord. Sir, come into the police car. No, I can't. Don't worry, just go, I'll find my way home, Abednego said. Then the landlord dipped his hand into his pocket and gave Abednego some money for his transport fare back home. Abednego arrived home and went to where he hid his spare key. He collected it, bathed, picked up a few of his clothes, and left the house for Damien's grandmother's place. She was stunned as soon as she saw him, with a swollen face. Abednego ended up narrating everything to her, and she really felt sorry. That night, the grandmother slept and saw her ghost daughter in the dream, telling her to hurry up and go and bring her other son the following day. The next morning, the grandmother told Abednego about it, and they wanted to leave for the city to Agada's place in the company of some police officers, but it rained heavily, and they had to wait until the following day. The grandmother kept wondering if it was the right decision, even though she didn't know why her ghost daughter wanted her to go get the boy so urgently. The next day they went to the city, then reported at a police station. They went to Agada's house, but the gate was flung open without a lock, and the security man was nowhere to be found. The grandmother and Abednego turned and looked at each other. They hurried inside the house, and 2 officers went with them. But the house was all empty and deserted. The grandmother immediately put her 2 hands on her head, wailing uncontrollably, and started rolling on the floor. Abednego hurried to her and started to console her, trying to help her up. But she refused. It took the efforts of the officers around before she finally got up. They left the deserted house and went back to the police station to make another report. They were there when Abednego told the grandmother that he wanted to go to his house to pick up a few clothes because he had picked up very few before traveling the other time. Abednego arrived at his house and started picking up some clothes in a hurry. Then he heard a very loud bang on their gate. He looked outside the window and saw 3 guys dressed in all black coming towards his room. At first, he thought they were robbers. On a second thought, what if they were actually coming for him? He picked up his bag and dashed out of his room without locking his door, and he took the back route and went to hide in a neighbor's room. He was there when he peeped through his neighbor's window, and lo and behold, he saw Agada standing with Donatus close to the gate, smoking. Abednego was shocked and almost said something to them, but his neighbor covered his mouth as they stood there watching them from his window. After a few minutes, they all left. Then Abednego went to bring out his phone from his pocket, but his pocket was empty. "What?" he exclaimed all of a sudden. "What is it?" his neighbor queried. "I left my phone in my room," Abednego said. They both hurried into Abednego's room. He found everything ransacked. Abednego and his neighbor searched for the phone, but couldn't find it. The neighbor tried calling Abednego's phone, but it was already switched off. Abednego stood there, devastated. He knew how much it had taken him to get that phone. He stood there with different thoughts running through his mind as tears flowed freely down his cheeks. His neighbor came to him with a hand placed on his shoulder. "Come on, man. Just cheer up. All will be well. I don't know what transpired between you and Donatus yet, but I'll write my number on a piece of paper for you so we can talk when you're calm. Let me know everything, so I'll know how to take it up. But I'll advise you to go out of here as soon as possible. Seriously, I'll not want you to spend your money on all these. I really appreciate it, but if you decide to take it up, you might be putting your life at risk and also end up spending much money, Abednego said. Don't worry about that, Abednego. I know all of you here in the compound don't know that I'm working with the State Security Service. Just let me know all that transpired between you and Donatus, he said, grinning. Abednego's jaw dropped. Are you serious? I never knew, he said. Abednego had truly never known, because the guy didn't even look like one who was into such a profession. He looked more like someone working in a zoo because he never cared about dressing well at all. He wouldn't even mind tying a wrapper under a polo shirt and going out with it. His dress sense was that bad. Yes, of course, the neighbor said. Then they shook hands and gave each other a goodbye hug. Abednego left and went back to the police station. The grandmother was already outside, restless and pacing up and down. Abednego, what took you so long? She queried. Abednego narrated everything to her, and she was dumbfounded. I'm so sorry about all you're going through because of us. But don't you think you should opt out of this already for your safety? No, Mama. If I perish, I perish. It's already too late to back out. She looked at him, smiling from ear to ear. Abednego really loved that smile, because he hadn't seen her smile since they arrived in the city. God bless you, my son. Amen, Ma'am, Abednego said, bowing his head. They finally left and went back to the village. As soon as they arrived, the grandmother went straight into her room, locking herself up, and they could hear her crying. Then Damien came to Abednego in his room after a few minutes. Uncle, why has Grandma been crying ever since you got back? He questioned. Abednego sighed, thinking of how best to explain to him, because he felt Damien needed to know since he was the medium. Let him tell his ghost mom. Maybe she can do something, Abednego soliloquized. He made Damien sit beside him on the bed. Damien, your twin brother is missing. That's why Grandma is crying, Abednego said. But I don't have a twin brother, Damien said. You do. Remember that little boy you saw on my phone the other day? Damien nodded. That's your twin brother. We don't know where he is, and it's not safe being around those people he's with presently, so Grandma wants him home, Abednego said. Damien turned swiftly, staring at the wall before them. Aeon, ghost summoner, time for action has come, Abednego muttered as he adjusted himself. Mum, have you gone to sleep? My twin brother is missing and Grandma has been crying and you're doing nothing about it, Damien said, as tears welled up in his eyes. His ghost mom appeared on the wall all of a sudden. The way she appeared, one could tell that she wasn't happy at all. She looked so angry and wore a squeezed face. Abednego was so scared to look at her the second time because of the way he saw her. She looked at Abednego, then at Damien, and then disappeared again. The room was immediately filled with smoke as soon as she left. The grandmother came out later that evening. Her eyes were all swollen and red. Abednego took her phone and called the State Security Service guy, and then narrated everything from A to Z. The officer asked for the boy's pictures, but Abednego told him that the pictures of Damien's twin he had taken were in that phone that was taken. But he took Damien's pictures and sent them to him, and told him that both of them looked so identical, so he could use Damien's picture instead to search for the other twin. 3 days later, the State Security Service guy called Abednego and told him that they had found Damien's twin. Abednego was flabbergasted as he stood up from the couch all of a sudden, and the grandmother's phone nearly fell off his hand. The grandmother got up as soon as she saw his reaction. "How? Where?" Abednego queried. "He was dumped in an orphanage home," the guy said. The state security service guy ended the call, and Abednego slowly dropped the phone from his ear. The grandmother, who couldn't wait to hear why Abednego had been called, was already trying to ask him what was going on with her actions, staring at him and popping her eyes. "What is it? Talk to me," she said. "Mama, they found the other twin in an orphanage," Abednego let out. "An orphanage? Please put on your clothes, let's go," she said, pacing around. "No, Mama, please, let's leave the traveling till tomorrow, it's already getting late." "What if they go back to that orphanage to take him? Please, Abednego, let's go." "Or should I go alone?" she queried. "No, Mama, let's wait till tomorrow. Nothing will happen to him, I'm sure of that." "I pray so," she said. That night, they were in bed when Abednego started hearing strange sounds from outside. He peeped through the window but found no one. He was already so scared, so he went back to bed, covering himself with a wrapper from head to toe. The next morning, Abednego heard a very loud scream coming from the girl who used to stay with the grandmother. He jerked up and sat up, but the scream continued, coming from outside. Abednego hurried out of the room, and the grandmother and he bumped into each other at the corridor. "What is it? What's going on?" she queried, hurrying out. "I don't know," Abednego said, hurrying after her. They went outside, and then saw 4 guys sweeping the compound as if their lives depended on it. They were sweeping without their shirts on, and at the same time, sweating profusely. The grandmother and Abednego looked at each other, then at the girl staying with her. "Who are they?" she questioned the girl. "I don't know. I met them here when I opened the door." Then she turned to the 4 guys. Abednego was already hiding behind the grandmother and shivering. "Who are you?" she asked, but they ignored her and continued sweeping. "I say, who are you?" she questioned again, but they were still sweeping without uttering a word. It was only in movies that Abednego had ever seen such a thing. He was still behind the grandmother, peeping. Yes, he was a man, but when it came to such things, he quickly withdrew so that his eyes would not see evil. "Who are you?" The grandmother was still busy questioning. The grandmother looked back all of a sudden. "Abednego, please get me my phone." "Ma, me," Abednego exclaimed with a hand on his chest. "Ah," he exclaimed again, looking around. Then he called the girl staying with the grandmother by her name and asked her to go bring the phone. She arrived with it after a few seconds, and the grandmother called the local police officers, who arrived in no time. The 4 men were taken away. It was there that one of them confessed that it was Agada who had sent them. As soon as the grandmother arrived from the police station to tell Abednego that, he went into the room and picked up his things, telling her he was going to his hometown, but the grandmother stopped him and assured him that he was safe there in their house. Like 2 hours later, they left for the city with Damien. They arrived at the orphanage and saw the other twin. As soon as the little boys saw each other, they stood before each other, looking into each other's eyes. The grandmother and Abednego just stood there, smiling from ear to ear amidst tears. "Who is he?" the grandmother queried, pointing at the twin. "It's me, he's carrying my face," Damien said, touching his twin's face. They laughed, and the other twin opened his arms wide for a hug. They hugged each other so tightly. The grandmother went and knelt beside them, holding each of them in her arms, and cried at the same time, praying for them. It was such a beautiful and emotional sight to behold. Abednego took the grandmother's phone and called the State Security Service guy, but he wasn't picking up. So the grandmother and Abednego went to see the owner of the orphanage to tell him they wanted to take Damien's twin. But he told them it wasn't that easy and told them the necessary steps they needed to take. The grandmother was ready to take those steps that very day, but Abednego told her to allow them to do things gradually. So they made a report at the police station first, then returned in 2 days for those steps to be carried out. When they were about to leave, Damien's twin didn't want them to go. He and Damien held hands and didn't want to leave each other. Damien, too, didn't want to leave without his twin. So the owner of the orphanage said they could leave Damien behind with his twin. The grandmother was scared and skeptical at first, but they were told that he was in safe hands. Well, they returned home without Damien. That day, as soon as they got home, the State Security Service guy gave Abednego a call that they had apprehended a Garda. Abednego was happy and sad at the same time. Happy because the grandmother and the other twin were finally going to get justice, and sad because he took part in a Garda's arrest. The grandmother was so happy that she threw a mini party that night, sharing food with all the neighbors. The following day, again, the grandmother and Abednego set out to the police station in the city. As soon as a Garda was brought out of the cell and set his eyes on Abednego, he became violent. Thank God he was cuffed. You betrayed me!" he thundered. The rage from his voice nearly threw Abednego off his feet. "I'm sorry," Abednego begged. "You're a coward and a fool. You must surely pay for this," he raged, struggling with the cuffs on his hands. He was put back in the cell, and they were asked to come back after like an hour when the chief police was around. They left the police station to the orphanage, and after they had carried out those necessary steps, Damien's twin was released to them. After some hours, they returned to the police station again. As soon as Damien's twin saw a Garda, because he was again brought out, he ran to him, giving him a hug. "Please leave my daddy alone," he said, still hugging him, and they all burst into tears. The officers started questioning him about the documents. He didn't want to confess at first, but later did after much torture. It was revealed by him that Donatus had gone to his sugar mummy to tell her about all his plans. Now Donatus and his sugar mummy had sold off some properties and had absconded with the remaining documents after dumping Damien's twin at the orphanage. He got to know all this when Donatus himself called him, telling him that he wasn't smart enough and that he had been outsmarted. "Please leave my daddy alone. Remove this thing from his hands," Damien's twin protested, dragging the cuffs on Agada's hands. "See, Andre, I will be fine, okay? Look, I'm not your daddy. That's your grandmother over there, and you need to go home with her," Agada said while dropping a tear. Abednego really felt for him. He even tried talking to him, but Agada shut him up. When the officers were taking him into the cell, Damien's twin started fighting them to leave him alone, but the grandmother quickly came and carried him. One question that had been pricking Abednego's heart till that date was, "Do you think I betrayed Agada?" But he knew he did the right thing. The grandmother, Abednego, and the twins left the police station very late, so they arrived at the village in the middle of the night. Till they reached home, Damien and his twin were inseparable. They sat close to each other, holding hands. They even slept off, leaning on each other, and still holding hands. They would have gone to the grandmother's daughter's house in the city to pass the night, but she had once told them that she couldn't accommodate them, so they stopped involving her. Chai! The bond between them is just so strong. Since I don't have twins, Whenever I see one, I always pray that my children would birth twins so I would have them as grandchildren." One of the travelers in the same car they boarded let out, watching them sleep as they held hands. The grandmother just sat there, smiling at the woman. They finally arrived home. The grandmother managed to make tea and fried eggs, and they headed immediately to bed after eating. Let Abednego call it breakfast, because it was already a few minutes to 1 a.m. Abednego was deeply asleep when he started feeling this very cool breeze. He was freezing. He jerked up and hurried to the door of the wardrobe where he had hung the wrapper the grandmother gave him to cover up. He laid on the bed, and in an attempt to cover himself, he saw this faded image on the wall, backing him. He was stunned. His jaw dropped, and the whole of his body became so numb. He wanted to shout, but his mouth suddenly became too heavy to open. Then the image turned, facing him, and lo and behold, it was the ghost lady. She stood there with a broad smile, waving at him at the same time. Then he finally summoned the courage to speak after regaining himself. You scared me. I'm sorry. I no longer have much time left on Earth. Please tell Mama and my boys that I love them so much. Thank you so much for all you've done for me. At least now I can go and rest peacefully. That account you once took money from? I hope you still remember the PIN. I have 10 million naira left in there. Tell Mama to take you and the boys to the bank I used to operate to see the manager. She knows there. The manager knows how to hand over the money to you guys. And for my remaining properties, please sell the 2 houses and settle Mama from all the proceeds. But don't touch the 6 plots of land. The addresses are written on the documents. As soon as the boys turn 18, give them 3 plots of land each. Take Mama and the boys out of the country for proper education, and please take good care of them. I trust you. That was why I chose you for the task. My sister will come for her own share. I'm sure of that. Give her just 1 million naira. Tell Damien I'm going to miss him so much. Tell his twin that I'm sorry the way things turned out. Let them both know that I'll always love and protect them. And please, call the other twin Diamond. Thank Mama for her bravery. Tell her I said she's the best mother in the world. Thank you so much once again. I'm grateful, she said, and then disappeared, waving at him. But the documents? Abednego let out, but she had already gone. He cried, tears of joy and sadness. He couldn't even close his eyes until morning, and he couldn't wait to break the news to the grandmother. As soon as he heard the grandmother's voice that morning, he went to her and told her everything. She started eulogizing and praying for her daughter, and then broke down in tears in the process. Abednego went to her and hugged her. The grandmother looked straight into his eyes. If not for you, all these wouldn't have been possible. You're still a very young man. Go with the kids abroad. Let me be here. I prefer it here. But Mama, she said, I know, my son, but I want to remain here. May God bless you, she said, placing a hand on his head. Abednego nodded. A few hours later, Abednego was relaxing outside and surfing the net with the grandmother's phone when he stumbled upon news on the internet with a woman's picture. He saw the picture but scrolled down to read the news. It happened that the woman was killed in a hotel by her younger lover. Abednego's jaw dropped, with the phone still glued to his face. Then he hurried to the grandmother's room. Mama, see, he said, panting and showing her the phone screen. She grabbed the phone and looked at it. Then she covered her mouth all of a sudden with one hand. The picture was that of Agada's acclaimed mother, who later happened to be his sugar mommy. Abednego took back the phone and then called the State Security Service guy, who told Abednego that he had been trying to reach them. He said that the woman's dead body was found in a hotel room but without the documents, as Donatus had gone away with them. The following week, they went to the bank to cash out the money. Abednego was there in the manager's office when he sighted someone through the glass doors standing outside, trying to come in. The person was adjusting his face cap, looking sideways almost every minute. Abednego rubbed his eyes. "No, my eyes can't be deceiving me," he soliloquized. It was Donatus. He was still wearing that face cap that looked like the tail of a fish. Despite the cash-outs he must have made, he still wore old clothes. Abednego tapped the grandmother and requested her phone. He didn't tell her anything. He called the State Security Service guy, but by the time he reached there, Donatus had already done his transactions and left. Abednego couldn't follow him. He was so scared of Donatus seeing him. The officers searched everywhere but couldn't find him. They left the bank very late, so they lodged in a hotel until the next day before proceeding to the village. The next day, they arrived in the village and saw a man kneeling in front of the house with some papers in his hands. Abednego was dumbfounded. At first, he thought it was a witch doctor or something. Only the grandmother had the courage to go check who it was. As soon as she saw the face, she beckoned Abednego over. "No, Mama, I can't come," Abednego said. "Come here, come and see," she said. Then Abednego walked slowly to where the grandmother was standing. As soon as he saw the man's face, his eyes popped open. "Donatus," he exclaimed. Well, Donatus was later arrested. That night, Abednego couldn't even close his eyes. He was overjoyed. So he was finally going to travel abroad just like that. I have finally arrived. My first day abroad, I will just sit in the middle of the road, not minding the cars that are passing, he muttered, smiling sheepishly. The next morning, Abednego went into Damien and Diamond's room, but he found Damien crying. "What's wrong?" he queried. "I have been calling Mommy, but she isn't responding," Damien said amidst tears. "Come here," Abednego said, opening his arms wide for a hug from both of them. The end. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell notification as we drop beautiful, captivating stories every 3 days. We love you.